The coin was in my hand before I'd made any decision about it. That's the thing I keep coming back to. I hadn't chosen to pick it up. I'd been working through the drawers in my father's garage for 3 hours, sorting wrenches, bagging old receipts, deciding what went to the estate sale and what went to the bin, and my hand just closed around it, the way your hand closes around anything small and unfamiliar in the back of a drawer. Reflex. Muscle memory. I held it up in the last of the afternoon light coming through the gap under the door, turned it over once, and nearly dropped it in the trash bag. I'd seen it my whole life, 52 years of knowing that coin existed, and never once caring about it. It lived on my father's workbench when I was a boy, then in a coffee tin, in the back of this drawer for as long as I could remember. Nobody cleaned it. Nobody talked about it. It didn't look like money. Too thick, too dark. The bronze so corroded it had gone almost black. If there were markings on it once, I couldn't find them. My mother used to joke that Dad had found it in some drainage ditch and kept it out of stubbornness. Dad never argued. He'd just look at it for a moment and put it back. He died 11 weeks ago. 79 years old, a Tuesday morning quietly, in the chair he always read in, and now I was in his garage at 64, retired, arthritic, 2 bad knees and a tendency to get sentimental over belt sanders. Trying to decide what to do with 40 years' worth of accumulated nothing. I almost put the coin in the bin. My thumb was over the lip of the bag. Then it got warm. Not the warmth of a hand holding metal. I know that warmth. I've held enough cold steel in my life to know the difference. This was a warmth that came from inside the thing, steady and even, like holding a coal that had been banked and waiting. I turned it over again. Nothing visible had changed. But I couldn't open my hand. I tried, and I don't mean that the way people say they froze. I mean my fingers stayed closed around it, and there was no particular force keeping them there. Just the absolute certainty, arriving without words, that letting go would be wrong. So I stood there in my dead father's garage with a piece of corroded bronze stuck to my palm, and the late sun striping the floor through the door gap, and I waited to see what it was going to do. The first glyph appeared at the center of the coin's face. I say appeared. It didn't light up the way a screen lights up. It was more that the surface of the coin, which had been uniform dark corrosion, resolved, like an image developing in a dark room, one fine line at a time, a single curved mark, like a half-closed eye, or the arc of an old astronomical symbol. Then a second mark adjacent to it. Then a third. Completing something I couldn't name, but somehow recognized the way you recognize a word in a language you were never formally taught but heard, spoken in the house when you were small. I felt my breathing slow down, not from fear, something closer to the feeling I'd had at my father's graveside. The sense of a door closing, or of something enormous becoming, first time, legible. The glyphs kept coming. They spread from the center outward, and the warmth spread with them, moving up through my palm and into my wrist, and I noticed, distantly, that the pain in my knuckles had stopped. Ads in my rough hand for 6 years. That Tuesday afternoon, with the coin sealed against my palm, it was simply gone. Thought about my father's hands, how stiff they'd been in his last years, and how he'd still held things carefully. Tools, mostly. His coffee cup. And that coin, I'd seen him hold it in the evenings sometimes, just sitting with it. I'd thought it was sentimentality. I'd thought a lot of things about my father that I was now beginning to revise. More glyphs had appeared than there was room for on the coin's face. They shouldn't have fit, but they were there, layered and luminous, shifting slightly, as though the surface was deeper than its physical dimensions. Aloud. The light they cast was pale and cold, blue-white, and it threw thin shadows across my fingers. The garage around me, the pegboard of wrenches, the smell of old oil, the rusted trailer hitch in the corner, all of it was still exactly as it had been. The world hadn't changed. Only my understanding of it was cracking open, seam by seam. I thought, my father did this. My father stood exactly like this. Somewhere, sometime, holding this thing while it did exactly this. And he never said a word to me about it. Why hadn't he said a word? Because it wasn't his to give. The answer arrived with a certainty that had no obvious source. Because it waits until the line calls it. Because the line isn't chosen, the line is recognized. My father was the keeper before me. His father before him, I was willing to bet, though the old man had died before I was born. Some inheritance you know about, Houses, tools, a name. Some inheritance knows about you and waits. The glyphs stilled, all of them at once, as though someone had pressed a pause. The warmth in my hand pulled back to the center of the coin, concentrated, and I felt the weight of the thing change. Not heavier in pounds, heavier in the way a word becomes heavy, when you realize it means something you didn't know it meant. I had time for one breath. Then the coin spoke. Not with a sound exactly, though I heard it the way you hear something said in a quiet room. It was precise. It was complete. It arrived in the space behind my sternum the same way grief arrives. Not from outside, but from somewhere you'd been carrying all along without naming it. Return, keeper of the undying threshold. 6 words, that was all. I stood there in the cooling garage for a long time after. My hand had opened on its own. The coin rested in my palm now instead of adhering to it. Ordinary looking again. Dark and corroded, the glyphs gone. It didn't feel ordinary, and my hand didn't ache. I turned the word over. Keeper. Not heir, not son, not inheritor. Keeper. A working title. A job. An old man who spent 40 years with a strange coin in the back of a drawer hadn't been waiting to be revealed as someone important. He'd been maintaining something. Showing up. Keeping the threshold. Whatever threshold that meant, whatever it sealed or held or stood between. By the simple act of not throwing the coin away, picking it up sometimes in the evenings and holding it and putting it back. That was his inheritance to me. Not a secret kingdom. Not a revelation. The discipline of keeping. I thought about the Tuesday mornings I'd come by and found him in his chair, with that coin on the side table next to his coffee. I'd thought he was just an old man who kept odd things. But he'd been attending to something every single day that I had never once noticed, and he'd done it without requiring an audience, without asking for recognition, without ever once saying, "Do you understand what I'm carrying?" I understood now. I was 64 years old, retired 2 bad knees, and I understood. I closed my fingers around the coin again, gently, the way you'd pick up something belonging to someone who had trusted you with it. The warmth returned immediately, not the overwhelming pulse of before, but a steady, low recognition, like a fire that had been burning in another room of a large house, and you'd only just found the door. I put it in my shirt pocket, where I'd be able to feel it against my chest. Then I finished sorting the garage, slowly, methodically, the way my father would have done it. Each tool examined, wiped, placed. It took another 2 hours. By the time I was done, what was gone, and the garage smelled like dust and machine oil, and the particular cold of an October evening. Off the light. I stood in the doorway for a moment, and looked back at the workbench where the coin had lived for so many years. I didn't know what the undying threshold was. I didn't know what keeping it required. I didn't know if I'd ever know, or if the knowing would come the way the warmth had come. Slowly, through the hands, through the work, through the simple fact of showing up and not letting go. What I knew was this. The coin had waited 40 years to say that to me. It had waited through every time I'd visited and ignored it. It had waited through my father's death and my grief, and my 3 hours of sorting. It had measured me against something, some register I had no access to, and found in me the thing it was looking for. My father had been that thing before me, his father before him, and whatever door I was now the keeper of, it had been kept, without interruption, without applause, by ordinary hands, in ordinary garages on ordinary Tuesday mornings, for longer than I had any way to calculate. I locked the garage door and walked to my car in the dark. The coin was warm against my chest all the way home.